Good evening and welcome to Estuary TV News with me, James Dunn. On tonight's show, I'll be speaking to writer and broadcaster Hugh Riches about a week in the newspapers. But first, here's Emma Lingard with the news headlines.
Council tax in North East Lincolnshire is set to rise. A centre to help people with autism and Asperger's needs new premises, and Tata Steel wins a French rail contract. Council tax in North East Lincolnshire could rise for the first time in 4 years. The proposed draft, which is to be confirmed today, will see council tax rise by 1.9%. There will also be 162 job losses in 2014-15, with another 66 in 2015-16. Councillor Chris Shaw, leader of North East Lincolnshire Council, said the proposal aims were to achieve the required savings of around £76 million by 2017. The final budget will be approved on February the 20th by the full council. A centre for people with autism in Scunthorpe faces closure if new premises are not found. Magic Moments, which has been operating for 12 years, offers help and support to families of children with autism and Asperger's. The lease on their current building in Cole Street runs out at the end of April, and the group needs to find another place.
I would like something like this, slightly smaller, right? At a reasonable rent, free if some nice government thing they can give us something, you know, the council can give us something, a nice businessman can give us something nice. But basically, with the rooms we've got here, it doesn't have to be quite so big, but that's basically what I'm looking for.
A charity in North East Lincolnshire which helps collect shoe boxes for Operation Christmas Child has relocated to larger premises. The Samaritan's Purse team has moved from its Home Hill site to the Ice House on Victor Street in Grimsby. Area Coordinator Pam Hodge has stepped down from the role and handed over to Denise Johnson. Tata Steel has won a 2-year contract to supply track to French rail operator SNCF. The deal will see more than 200,000 tonnes of track being supplied from its plant in France. However, the French rolling mill will be supplied with steel from Tata's Scunthorpe Steelworks. A 20-year-old girl from Scunthorpe has raised over £700 for the Macmillan nurses who cared for her grandmother through a skydive. Rebecca Heald wanted to repay the team who had looked after her nana, Barbara Watson, before she died in July from lung cancer. Rebecca enjoyed her skydive so much she plans to do another one. HGV drivers who break the weight limit in Belton on the Isle of Axholme could face prosecution. Humberside Police, in conjunction with the Vehicle and Operator Services Agency, will be monitoring lorry movements along Westgate Road using specially designed equipment. A study in December showed 175 vehicles broke the weight restriction. Picasso, Dali, Matisse and Warhol are just some of the paintings being displayed in a new exhibition in Lincoln. The Modern Masters exhibition brings together some of history's most iconic paintings. It will be the first time the paintings have all been displayed in Lincolnshire and includes Warhol's iconic pop art image of Marilyn Monroe. It's showing at the Usher Gallery from now until the end of March. Land with residential development opportunities is being sought within East Lindsey to accommodate anticipated housing growth over the next 15 to 20 years. Possible sites include areas in Louth, Binbrook, North Thoresby and Tetney, among others. Areas are also needed to be found for potential gypsy traveller sites. The midwifery team from Scunthorpe Hospital has been shortlisted for 2 national awards. They've reached the final of the annual Royal College of Midwives Awards in 2 categories and will find out later this month whether they've been successful. The team were nominated by senior staff for the work they've done to promote a normal birth experience for pregnant women. And that's all.
Thanks, Emma. Now, today with me I have Hugh Riches to talk to me about the big stories that appeared in last week's local newspapers. As a journalist, Hugh has written for the South China Morning Post and the Azerbaijan Times, but you might know him better from some of his shows right here on Estuary TV, such as Hot Topic and Let's Talk North East Lincolnshire. Welcome back, Hugh.
Thank you, James. Good to be here.
Nice to have you here. So, first of all, let's talk about some of the stories that you were interested in the local newspapers this week.
What caught my eye first was a story about the North Lincolnshire and Goole NHS Trust.
That's here today in the Grimsby Telegraph.
In the Grimsby Telegraph. 1.67 million deficit this year, and that seems to me quite a small number in comparison to the total annual budget of an NHS trust. But it's 1.67 million this year, and it was only about $250,000 last year.
So the most worrying thing, I suppose, it's a growing deficit.
The deficit is growing so quickly, yeah. And the trust has said it's because of various capital investments they've made, but also because they're preparing money they've spent preparing for the winter, which I would have thought is a cost every year.
You would think so.
Not something that's going to happen just for this year.
But the Trust is saying that those costs are actually rising. The number of patients, surprisingly, aren't rising, the Trust says.
The number of patients isn't rising, but the seriousness of their ailments is. Apparently it's getting worse. The word they use is acuity. And they are investing in various things, including more staff, including not earlier this year, but last year, at the end of last year, bringing in, I think it was about 30 Spanish nurses.
Because they're struggling to bring professional people into this area, they've said before.
They are. I mean, they're not getting professional people from the UK if they're having to go to Southern Europe in order to recruit their staff. But obviously that's a cost as well, and perhaps that will be reflected in an improvement in the health of North East Lincolnshire and Northern Lincolnshire and Goole. Yeah.
Now, secondly, what else would you like to talk about?
Again, from the Scunthorpe Telegraph, a story about Humberside Airport, which there's a possibility people are lobbying for it to be renamed. So from Humberside, it should become John Harrison Airport, in honour of the man who invented the marine chronometer.
In the Scunthorpe Telegraph?
That's it, down there at the bottom of the page. Who created the marine chronometer that allowed mariners to discover their longitude, because they knew how many hours away in longitude they were from the Greenwich Meridian. And he, in the 18th century, was the man who won the great competition that the Admiralty set up and the Royal Observatory set up to allow sailors to know whereabouts, how far east and how far west they were, by having an accurate watch that wouldn't be destroyed by motion at sea. And he's a local man. He's from Northern Lincolnshire, and when he won the competition, they didn't give him his prize, incidentally. So maybe it's time that he's honoured, at least by naming an airport. You know, the most modern idea of international, global, oceanic travel should have this airport named after him.
We actually had someone on the show yesterday who was telling me that the prize at the time was worth something like £7 million. It
would have been a good amount of money to have. But he spent his whole life working on this. He started off making clocks out of wood, because they were more accurate, because they didn't change size with temperatures as metal do. But he never really got the recognition until the late 20th century, when books were written about him, that he deserves. So it would be a fine honour for him, but there are those saying that we're trying to, let's not ruin the Humber brand. People are just getting used to the idea that Humber's a great international place.
Because the airport's saying it's not the right time at the moment, isn't it?
Exactly. Let's not confuse people.
So what else have we got to talk about here today? You mentioned this story here in the Grimsby Telegraph.
Unidentified flying objects flying over Grimsby. Yes, several sightings over the last week or so of flying saucers, spaceships. Close encounters of the third kind. And unsurprisingly and quite understandably, the part of our planet they most wish to visit is Grimsby and, of course, Cleethorpes.
And who wouldn't?
And who wouldn't, quite. They're very welcome, little green men. Well, I've seen little green men anyway, but the ones from outer space are more than welcome to come and say hello. Earthling.
And it's not the first time we've heard sightings such as this in the area.
It's not the first time we've seen strange things in the sky, no.
I shouldn't think it will be the last.
I doubt it, no. There'll be a few more.
Now, there's another one that you flagged up here, which is in the Market Raisin Mail, and this is about local libraries.
This is an important story. Lincolnshire County Council is going to cut the budget for its libraries massively. And there are various libraries which will be closed most of the week. Some will be run purely by volunteers, not paid for by the council at all. And local groups are assembling the money and the energy to take them to court, to go to the High Court. And
I believe they're seeking legal advice at this stage.
And there's a possibility, if the legal advice is that they can take an action against the council to get an injunction in the High Court. If that's the case, then that will be setting a precedent, which means that not only may Lincolnshire Council not close down its libraries at this rate, but that'll be binding across the whole country.
Exactly, and almost every local council, as we live in an era where budgets are being cut from central government, everywhere is cutting various services, including libraries and including North East Lincolnshire Council.
Yes, and North East Lincolnshire Council is likely to follow suit, to follow Lincolnshire Council's example.
They're already in the process of doing so.
Well, quite, I know, and sad as it is, libraries are one of those services that perhaps are not absolutely necessary to life, but they're necessary to a literate or curious life.
And certainly that's a story we might see a lot more of in the future, perhaps.
If it does go to the High Court, that'll be very interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Now, an interesting one that you flagged up here. This is in the Hull Daily Mail. I don't think that'll be the only paper it's appeared in this week. And this is about Police and Crime Commissioner Matthew Grove.
Yes.
Who was caught for speeding in October.
He was.
But since then, when it did hit the headlines, he has attended a driving course.
He has. A speed awareness course. It cost him 95 quid. He's fessed up and said he was sorry. He was thinking about something else as he was driving along Peaks Parkway on the south bank of the Humber. And he's committed a criminal offence by going 6 miles over the speed limit in a 30-mile-an-hour area. The 30-mile-an-hour area is a 3-lane boulevard with no shops or pavements on either side of it, but that nevertheless is the law, and Police and Crime Commissioner really should obey the law.
Yes, if anyone should, you think he should.
It's interesting that the £95 he paid, and then he spent a day at a speed awareness course, but his deputy, a month or so previously, had also been caught going over the limit, and he wasn't offered the option of a £95 course. He just had to pay the £100 fine and take the points.
Police's discretion as to whether they offer that.
It is, yeah, yeah.
Now, finally, I'm not sure how much time we're going to have for anything else after this, I'm afraid, Hugh, but we've got a story about the paving in Grimsby Town Centre and Freeman Street, which is a bizarre story.
One of my favourite stories, really. This must run and run. The herringbone Harris Tweed crazy paving that has been introduced into the various parts of the centre of Grimsby. At a cost of £6 million, around 2 million of that generated by the council, and various complaints that the colouring of the stones is confusing people. People think that the black stones are holes, and so they keep jumping over them and hurting themselves, and the possibility of tripping up and damaging themselves. There's also a possibility that the colour scheme is giving people epilepsy, rather like strobe lights.
I think it's triggering their epilepsy, isn't it?
Triggering epilepsy.
I believe that Councillor Steve Bazant, who's a ward councillor from that ward, has said that it's had an effect on him.
Well, he's an epilepsy sufferer anyway. I don't know if the paving has actually affected him, but it has the potential to do so.
Thank you, Hugh. That's certainly not the last we will hear on that, I suspect.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much. That's all we've got time for today, but we'll see you again next time. Don't forget, if you know of any local stories, contact the news team on Twitter at Estuary TV, via Facebook, or give the newsroom a call. Thanks. Bye.
Catch up with Everything Community. Engaged Monday to Friday at 4:25, and catch it again at 7:35.